When the family first came here, they had cattle. Now the cattle were for their hides. They were not for the meat. That didn't come until later when the Americans came and wanted the meat. They were for the hides only. The hides were money, and they were worth $1 to $3 approximately. They would take the hide off and they'd dry it and they'd stack it. And this was the banknote. I have a photograph that shows the storehouse for the hides that's at the Petaluma Adobe. So this is Vallejo's Adobe, and this is how they stacked the cow hides. So they did that for a number of years, but as the gold rush happened, as their land was being squatted on and taken away, and the cattle weren't allowed to roam freely anymore, they had to move into other ways of making money. Now, interestingly enough, the cow, which they used just about everything of, so they did, of course, eat carne asada, if you've ever had that. They would cook the cows for their meat, but they, for the most part, left the meat alone. If you ran across, if you were hungry and you found a cow out in the pasture, you could eat the meat. That was fine. Do not take the hide. You would be killed for taking the hide. It was that critical to them. So a byproduct of the cow was tallow, and they would use the best tallow for cooking. That was called manteca. Manteca was what they used for the cooking, but then they would also use the rest of the fat to make the tallow candles. The candles, interestingly enough, tallow had a bigger market. They made more money in tallow than they did in cows. So in the cow hides themselves. And this product, this is kind of a pathetic looking candle, but they would make these by hand. There were great big giant vats that they used to cook the tallow. In fact, we have a couple of those big vats over by the museum. And they would hand dip these. They'd have like a pole, and you can see that there's a knot on the top that also serves as the wick. And they'd have this pole, and you'd stick the candle down, or you'd stick the string down into the tallow, pull it out, let it dry a little bit, stick it down there, pull it out. They made tallow candles for their own personal use, but they also sent that tallow, those tallow, on what were known as greasers. These great big tankers that would carry the tallow in trade. Interestingly enough, during the 1850s, a neighbor who lived nearby, who had been part of the many parties and fandangos that occurred on these ranchos here, she said that by the 1850s, they pretty well had gone. They weren't around anymore, and she referred to us as greasers. You've heard that pejorative being used toward people in the Spanish culture, but this is the origin of that term. It, of course, came to mean other things, anybody working in automotive or whatever, but initially it was because of the tallow tankers called greasers.